Jessica shouted, "You're finished!" Jasmine Crockett. One line went viral. A startling fact or emotional moment. One line, less than 10 words, can end a career or change history. This video unpacks why Jessica's fiery "You're finished" Jasmine Crockett sparked outrage, fascination, and analysis across the country, and the hidden forces that make one-liners go nuclear. Ask, what's the most unforgettable political zinger you still remember years later? Drop it in the comments. We'll see who recalls the sharpest comebacks. Have you ever noticed how a single sentence can outlive an entire book? In politics, leadership, and even everyday arguments, one-liners often carry more force than pages of policy or hours of debate. It sounds almost unfair, a decade of strategy versus 10 words of heat, but history repeatedly proves that it's true. A quick phrase, sharp or witty, can break through the noise in ways detailed explanations never do. Think about it. Our brains are wired to grab and cling to the simplest, most emotionally charged signals. Entire campaigns may be forgotten, but a well-timed line gets replayed forever. Words that sting or inspire compress complicated realities into punchy clarity. That compression is power. It's why a courtroom can tilt or a debate stage can shift on one perfectly landed phrase. One sentence can win trust or destroy credibility. Now, the real-world impact is staggering. Studies show people are more likely to share quick statements than full speeches. A policy briefing may vanish overnight, but a 5-second clip trends for weeks. The viral economy thrives on brevity. Brevity travels fast. Combined with emotion, it sticks like glue. Ask anyone what they remember from last year's debates. Chances are not the budget numbers, just the moment. Exactly. So here's the takeaway. Don't underestimate the small. Whether in politics or personal life, CLA. Variety beats volume. The shorter and sharper the message, the greater the reach. That's a game changer. Practice distilling your big idea into one striking sentence. That's how you win attention, respect, and sometimes even the entire narrative. Picture the scene. A heated exchange in the chamber, tension hanging like static, and suddenly Jessica's voice cuts through the noise, loud, deliberate, and undeniable. "You're finished." That one sentence wasn't just words, it was fuel. In politics, tone is as important as content. And Jessica's tone? Fierce, final, unyielding. It snapped listeners awake, made reporters lean forward, and within minutes, that clip began its online ascent. Why did it stick? Because moments like this blend drama with clarity. Political spats are usually messy, overlapping arguments, long-winded rebuttals, a fog of jargon. But Jessica's lines stripped it bare. No backstory needed, no footnotes required. Anyone watching immediately understood the intent. Dominance declared. Sound bites thrive on simplicity. Simple but sharp sentences can cut through hours of noise like a blade. That's exactly what happened here. The internet did the rest. Viewers clipped the line, memes popped up, hashtags spread, and suddenly a single shout wasn't just a chamber moment, it was a nationwide talking point. What started as a verbal strike in a political skirmish became entertainment, commentary, and ammunition all at once. Audiences saw not just a disagreement but a battle cry, a turning point worth replaying. Here's where real impact lands. In the viral age, control over your own words often evaporates. Once a clip escapes into the digital bloodstream, it no longer belongs to the speaker alone. The public remixes it, twists it, amplifies it. Jessica's shout wasn't just her outburst anymore. It became collective property, shared across timelines, stitched into reactions, embedded in narratives larger than herself. So the lesson: every word in a heated room is a potential headline. Every line is a legacy. One slip or one strike can alter everything. Choose words like weapons. If Jessica's shout was the spark, Jasmine Crockett's retort was the explosion. What often gets missed in heated exchanges is that conflict only goes viral when there's a counterpunch. Silence dies quickly. Sharp words survive. And Crockett delivered hers with a mix of composed fury and precision timing that turned a tense moment into a cultural flashpoint. People weren't just watching a quarrel, they were watching a duel. Crockett's line didn't need theatrics. It had balance. Part defense, part offense, all confidence. Audiences gravitated to that calm but cutting cadence because it embodied something larger than the clash itself. Here was a younger, rising voice facing fire, and not only withstanding it, but flipping it back around. In politics, strength is often judged on posture as much as policy. Crockett's posture screamed resilience. Now, think about the viral mechanics. Jessica's words alone might have circulated briefly, but Crockett's comeback gave the story shape. A one-sided outburst is noise, a duel is narrative, and narratives are what people share. Social media thrives on battles to frame. Hero, challenger, underdog, villain. By retorting in the way she did, Crockett unwittingly set herself up as the protagonist of that online script. The clip then traveled not just as gossip, but as inspiration and identity fuel for those who saw her as representing their own frustrations. Here lies the everyday lesson. When confronted, your response matters as much as the attack. A measured retort, short, memorable, and charged with conviction, can turn pressure into presence. People respect control under fire. Crockett's reaction didn't merely save face, it built her brand. So remember this, being reactive isn't enough. Being strategic in response is what makes moments historic. What Jessica and Jasmine exchanged may feel dramatic, but it's part of a much older tradition. Political history is littered with moments where a single cutting phrase tilted the balance of perception. Generations before hashtags and viral clips, sharp one-liners already ruled the battlefield of ideas. They were the arrows shot across debate halls, campaign rallies, and even courtroom floors. And the longest-lasting zingers, they still echo decades later. Consider debates. An eloquent policy breakdown might bore, but a witty quip could end a career. Audiences barely recall the economic points discussed in some of the most famous debate nights, yet they never forget the devastating comebacks that followed a fumbled answer. Those mic drop moments became shorthand for entire elections. A good speech moved the room. One killer line moved the nation. In legislatures, too, the pattern repeats. Lawmakers have turned hearings into theater, their verbal jabs as memorable as their votes. Some seized advantage with light humor, others with icy severity. Time and again, politicians discovered that sharpness of tongue could outweigh thickness of argument. If speeches are symphonies, zingers are cymbal crashes, sudden, loud, unforgettable. Here's why it matters. Public memory has always been selective. Before social media, newspapers and live broadcasts already chose the line that defined the night, stripping hours of deliberation into seconds of drama. Today's viral clips are yesterday's front-page quotes, different medium, same dynamic. So the takeaway is this. History rewards the memorable, not always the detailed. If you want to persuade, influence, or even defend yourself in a heated moment, don't just rely on depth. Craft the line that lasts. Because long arguments fade, but sharp phrases become legend. If Jessica's shout was the match and Jasmine's retort was the spark, social media was the gasoline that turned the moment into a firestorm. In any other era, their exchange might have remained within the walls of Congress, quoted in a newspaper, replayed in small clips on the evening news, then forgotten a week later. But today, one smartphone recording can outpace traditional headlines in seconds. Amplification is instantaneous. Think of the mechanics. Platforms like Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram thrive on the short, the bold, and the emotional. A 1-hour hearing gets clipped down to 6 seconds of drama, and suddenly, millions are watching the line without context. Speed and brevity are baked into the system. What used to be a 30-second soundbite is now a looping meme. And repetition drives memory. Viral posts don't just spread, they ingrain. What's striking is how the audience becomes co-creators, remixing, captioning, stitching. Jessica's shout was shared in outrage and humor alike. Crockett's comeback was turned into motivational edits and fan reels. The line is no longer owned by the speaker, it's owned by the internet. That transformation is fueled not just by algorithms, but by hunger. People crave drama, and social media delivers it on replay. And here's the real-world consequence. Moments are magnified far beyond intent. A fury-laced comment that might once have been a footnote can balloon into a narrative-defining saga. Careers can rise or collapse because a clip refuses to die. So the takeaway? If you step into public spaces, whether politics, business, or even your own workplace, assume someone is recording. Every phrase holds explosive potential once it hits the social feeds. The moment you speak, control starts slipping. Guard your words like currency. Why do these sharp moments stick so powerfully in our minds? The answer lies in audience psychology. H. Humans are wired to notice conflict, tension, and resolution. A fiery back and forth satisfies that instinct almost like a mini drama. Cognitive scientists tell us the brain prioritizes emotionally charged content over neutral information. In plain language, we might forget the policy talk, but the sting of, "You're finished?" that lodges instantly. Conflict grabs attention because it triggers survival impulses. In ancient times, overhearing raised voices could mean threat, danger, or change. Today, the same mechanism fires up when we scroll and stumble upon political spats. The arguments may be symbolic, but our brains still process them as urgent. That urgency translates into clicks, shares, and rewatches. Attention craves tension, but it's not just conflict, it's identity. Audiences subconsciously align with whoever echoes their values, frustrations, or sense of justice. Crockett's supporters didn't just see her words, they saw themselves standing strong in the face of confrontation. Meanwhile, others latched onto Jessica's bluntness as a refreshing display of finality. People project their own emotions onto the speakers. That's why the same clip can inspire anger and admiration simultaneously. And here's what's really fascinating. Psychologists call it the flashbulb effect. When a moment triggers strong emotion, our memory of it becomes unusually vivid. That's why audiences years later can recall one-liners from debates, while the surrounding discussion fades into blur. Emotion fixes memory. The lesson here is simple but vital. If your goal is to be remembered, speak in ways that spark feeling. Facts inform, emotions endure. See every phrase not just as words, but as triggers. Because in the theater of attention, psychology is the ultimate stage. For every viral one-liner that cements a reputation, there's another that backfires spectacularly. History reminds us that the sharp sword of rhetoric cuts both ways. A zinger can crown a politician as clever, confident, and strong, but when misfired, it can brand them as cruel, out of touch, or downright reckless. That duality is the danger and allure of speaking sharply in public forums. Think about classic moments. Some lines have propelled leaders forward, transforming them into larger-than-life figures because they captured an era's mood. The punch was precise, the audience ready, and the timing perfect. Yet for others, an attempt at wit or dominance collapsed under scrutiny. That's when the crowd shifts from applause to ridicule, or worse, outrage. Once replayed endlessly, the losing line becomes an albatross that follows careers for decades. The digital age heightens these stakes. A poorly chosen jab is now immortalized, searchable, and memified forever. What once faded after a news cycle now resurfaces endlessly. A clever one-liner can go down in history, but a wrong tone can end up as a case study in communications disasters. Winners gain admiration and virality. Losers face humiliation and unforgiving echo chambers. Same tool, opposite outcomes. And here's the takeaway for anyone navigating heated discussions. The margin between triumph and disaster is razor thin. Zingers should be delivered with both precision and foresight. If your words illuminate truth or amplify resilience, they'll resonate. But if they're rooted in pettiness or disrespect, they'll almost certainly backfire. So remember this mantra: the sharper the sword, the steadier the hand must be. Winning moments demand clarity and empathy. Backfires expose recklessness. Knowing the difference is what separates legends from liabilities. Every viral moment isn't judged on words alone. It's also felt, irrid through identity. Who says the line shapes how the world receives it? Gender, race, age, and even accent matter far more than many admit. When Jessica shouted, her authority was perceived one way. When Jasmine Crockett fired back, her identity reframed the entire exchange. Audiences weren't only reacting to words, they were reacting to representation. Here's the truth. Politics doesn't exist in a vacuum. A woman delivering a forceful comment may be described as shrill, while a man using the same tone may be praised as strong. A younger politician might be dismissed as emotional, while an older one gets credited for passion. These subconscious biases change interpretation long before a word goes viral. Crockett's retort gained traction partly because it symbolized more than defiance. For many communities, she represented being underestimated, dismissed, yet standing firm. It wasn't just a clapback, it became a stand-in for resilience against stereotypes and dismissal. Representation magnifies reaction. That's why certain groups celebrated her words as not just politics but personal validation. Identity reshapes perception. On the flip side, Jessica's fierce line, though just as concise, rang differently to different ears. Some applauded her bluntness. Others saw it as antagonistic, particularly toward a younger black female colleague. The same line wears different jackets depending on the speaker's role and the listener's lens. That dual reception made the clash feel larger than office sparring. It felt like a cultural showdown. The takeaway is vital. Never underestimate how identity colors communication. Your words are never just your words. They are read through the story people attach to you. Effective leaders recognize that perception gap and learn to wield identity not as baggage but as power. The moment a fiery exchange escapes into the wild, it doesn't just live on social media. Traditional media steps in, and that's when the spiral starts. News outlets, cable talk shows, digital publishers, even late-night programs pick up the clip, replay it, and frame it according to their angle. Suddenly, a 5-second chamber remark becomes the subject of endless commentary. What was once a fleeting burst of emotion is now a national conversation. Amplification has its own momentum. Here's how it works. Social platforms create initial buzz, but mainstream media provides validation. A viral clip on Twitter might circulate among a few million, but when it appears on primetime news or gets written up in national op-eds, the moment becomes cemented as important. In essence, resharing transforms into reporting, and reporting transforms into analysis. The spiral goes from spark to wildfire. The media doesn't just amplify, it shapes the narrative. Headlines strip context, emphasizing conflict above complexity. Talk panels spend hours dissecting tone, motive, optics. Each repetition adds layers, even exaggerations. Viewers then bring the story back online, fueling new takes, memes, and debates. The cycle spins faster until the original moment is almost unrecognizable. It's no longer about what was said, but about what it means. And this is the consequence. Politicians lose control of their own message. A remark intended for one audience ends up reframed for everyone. Amplification doesn't stop when you stop speaking. It grows louder with each echo. So here's the lesson. In today's landscape, your words aren't measured by intent, but by velocity. Once spoken, the spiral belongs to the crowd. If you want to manage the storm, you must learn to anticipate it before the first syllable leaves your lips. Ask, what's the most unforgettable political zinger you still remember years later? Drop it in the comments. We'll see who recalls the sharpest comebacks. Not every viral line is born by accident. Some are carefully engineered, rehearsed behind closed doors, tested on advisors and staffers, true strategic strikes designed to land like thunder. Others spill out in raw emotion, unfiltered and unscripted, becoming lightning bolts no speechwriter could ever plan. Yet both types, planned or accidental, have equal power to reshape narratives. Consider the strategic. Politicians often walk into debates or hearings with a line locked and loaded, ready for the perfect opening. They know TV soundbites dominate the news cycle more than policy detail. A practiced phrase can look spontaneous, but is anything but. It's a crafted weapon disguised as reflex. If it lands, the speaker wins control of the news. If it misses, it reeks of calculation and falls flat. Strategy carries risk. Now, contrast that with the accidental. Sometimes the most impactful lines slip out in a rush of anger or passion. Jessica's "you're finished" didn't appear scripted. Its rawness gave it edge. Crockett's fiery retort likely wasn't in any prep notes either. That unpredictability is what made the moment feel real, and reality is contagious online. Audiences gravitate toward authenticity, whether it's polished or messy. Accident sometimes beats strategy. But here's the catch. Once the words are spoken, no one cares about intent. A planned jab and a spontaneous burst both live the same viral afterlife once clipped, shared, and remixed. The public doesn't weigh preparation. They react to effect. Strategic or accidental, both can crown you or crush you. So the takeaway is simple. Control what you can, prepare what's wise, but know that authenticity often outshines rehearsal. In the arena of soundbites, crafted brilliance and emotional blurts share equal power. What matters most is impact, not origin. Step into any political debate, and you'll notice something striking. It isn't run like a classroom, it's staged like a theater. From the lights to the pacing, the setup feels less about policy exchange and more about performance. Candidates are actors, moderators are directors, and the audience, both live and online, serves as critic and amplifier. Every glance, pause, and especially every one-liner is designed for maximum stage effect. This is the debate theater effect. Why does it matter? Because in truth, debates rarely change minds through dense policy arguments. Instead, they shape perception through moments. Think about it. Who remembers the intricate details of tax reform presented on stage years ago? Almost no one. What people recall are the clap lines, the cutting put-downs, the facial reactions. Theater, not textbook, wins memory. Debates are inherently structured for this. The ticking clock forces brevity. The head-to-head format rewards drama. The presence of cameras nudges participants towards spectacle. What might be a small disagreement in private becomes a sword fight on stage, and if a participant lands one unforgettable line, that clip immediately becomes the headline, overshadowing hours of serious discussion. Debate is performance first, policy second. For Jessica and Crockett, their exchange carried that same theatrical energy. Though not on a formal debate stage, the chamber itself became an arena. Spectators, millions online, treated the moment like live drama. It wasn't just governance, it was theater, and theater sells. So here's the deeper takeaway. If you enter a public forum, recognize that you're not just informing, you're performing. Preparation is key, but so is awareness of the stage. Nail the line, embody confidence, and remember, the spotlight always favors drama. Debate without theater fades. Theater without substance lingers. If there's a narrative audiences never resist, it's the underdog rising up. Throughout history, stories of the underestimated challenger clapping back at the seemingly stronger opponent always capture hearts. Why? Because people instinctively root for imbalance to be corrected. When someone deemed smaller or less powerful lands a sharp, decisive blow, it feels like justice unfolding in real time. That's why underdog smackdowns go viral. They satisfy a universal appetite for reversal. Look closely at Crockett's side of the exchange. She wasn't the one raising her voice first. She responded, measured but firm, to someone asserting dominance over her. Viewers instinctively placed her in the underdog role, not because she lacked skill, but because of the optics. Younger, newer, facing down an established colleague shouting, "You're finished." When she shot back, it wasn't just a comeback. It was a symbolic push against being steamrolled. And this symbolism matters. Social media thrives on stories, not just statements. Crockett's response became a clip that audiences reframed as a David and Goliath showdown. It wasn't just politics. It was a stand-in for every overlooked employee clapping back at an overbearing boss, every student confronting a dismissive teacher, every outsider standing tall against authority. The appeal was universal. Underdog smackdowns fire up a crowd because they offer both catharsis and hope. People see themselves in the underdog, then cheer when that archetype wins, even if only with a single sentence. In an age of viral content, that dynamic guarantees traction. Here's your takeaway. When facing power dynamics, dignity in reply is gold. A calm, sharp retort doesn't just defend you, it elevates you in the eyes of others. Underdogs have the loudest victories when their bite surprises everyone. That's why smackdowns stick. Leadership isn't always about titles, experience, or even legislation. It often comes down to language. Words shape perception, and perception shapes power. A leader who commands the room with a single phrase can inspire more confidence than one who explains an entire policy. That isn't because substance doesn't matter. It's because humans look for signals. Language is a signal of control, conviction, and vision. Think about it. When someone speaks with sharp clarity, we instinctively assign them authority. It's why history books often immortalize the quote, not the spreadsheets behind it. Whether it's a wartime prime minister rallying resilience or a civil rights advocate igniting change with just a few syllables, leadership by language echoes longer. Charisma often arrives in sentence form. That's what made Crockett's retort so powerful. In that instant, she wasn't just defending herself, she was projecting leadership qualities like confidence, wit, and courage under fire. Meanwhile, Jessica's explosive shout, though forceful, was perceived differently, more emotional than authoritative. One line strengthened its speaker's credibility, while the other risked eroding it. Language can lift or lower, regardless of intent. In modern politics, especially in viral spaces, the power of linguistic leadership is exponential. The clip you deliver isn't just heard, it's replayed, remixed, and rebranded hundreds of times. Each replay magnifies your stature or your stumble. Words become your legacy because they live far beyond the moment. Legacy is language. For anyone watching, the lesson translates outside of politics. In workplaces, communities, even family discussions, the ability to frame your point in strong, crisp language earns trust faster than long-winded reasoning. The sharper and clearer your words, the stronger your presence feels. Speak as though your sentence is your signature, because in many ways, it is. For every moment where sharp language feels empowering, there is a darker side, when rhetoric turns toxic. The very qualities that make sound bites powerful, brevity, intensity, emotional charge, also make them dangerous when misused. Instead of rallying voices, they can drive wedges. Instead of inspiring respect, they can ferment hostility. The pitfall is real. In chasing virality, some leaders poison the well they draw from. Toxic language shows up when one-liners shift from assertive to demeaning. What was meant as strength becomes mockery. Audiences are savvy. They can sense when a remark is less about conviction and more about cruelty. And while negativity travels fast online, it often leaves corrosive residue behind. A cutting insult might trend today, but tomorrow it erodes credibility, framing its speaker as unprofessional, bitter, or unfit. Even more damaging, toxicity breeds polarization. When a soundbite insults rather than challenges, supporters may cheer louder, but opponents harden into immovable resistance. Dialogue collapses into tribal cheering sections, and the spiral repeats, louder, nastier, less constructive. What could have been an empowering zinger becomes an accelerant for division. Jessica's shout risked this interpretation for some viewers, seen not as passion, but as personal attack. The backlash reminded us that tone and framing influence whether a line uplifts or undermines. Crockett, by contrast, leaned into defiance without personal diminishment, which partly explains the difference in reception. Here's the crucial takeaway. Words aren't just weapons, they're seeds. They either grow trust or spread weeds of resentment. Before unleashing the next sharp line, ask yourself, will this add weight and authority, or will it leave scars? Viral moments fade, but reputations built or broken by toxic language endure far longer. To really understand why one-liners cut so deep, we turn to the experts. Communication scholars have studied the science of rhetoric for decades, and their findings are remarkably clear. Short, emotionally charged statements are sticky. Dr. John Antal, a linguist specializing in political discourse, explains that concise lines act like cognitive Velcro. They catch on because they require little processing power, but pack maximum emotional voltage. In short, the brain loves efficiency. Neuroscience backs this up. Studies using brain scans show that emotionally loaded language activates both memory centers and reward circuits. This double stimulation makes people more likely to remember and repeat what they heard. That's why slogans, punchy quotes, and sharp zingers not only stay in the brain, they spread through communities like wildfire. Words literally light us up. Psychology adds another lens. Dr. Shanto Iyengar, a professor of political science, argues that sound bites don't just spread, they sculpt perception. When citizens hear repeated, simplified lines, they form personal judgments less on detail and more on tone. Identity, trust, and authority are unconsciously assigned through moments rather than manifestos. The soundbite isn't a side dish, it's the main course by which leaders are judged. Even media scholars note the evolutionary role of zingers. Dr. Kathleen Hall Jamieson observes that headlines and news packages naturally clip complexity into singular highlights, making politicians one-liners evolutionary survivors in a hostile information jungle. Long policy speeches die quickly, lines with wit or edge live on indefinitely. Takeaway? Experts agree. Being intentional with short-form language isn't optional, it's essential. If you don't craft your sound bites, someone else will define them for you. A sharp mind must be matched with sharp phrasing. Otherwise, you surrender the battlefield of memory before you even step into it. What happens when the next viral one-liner isn't even real? That's the frontier we've stepped into, where AI can fabricate voices, remix faces, and script sound bites that never happened. The battleground isn't just rhetoric anymore. It's reality itself. In this new arena, a convincing fake line can ricochet through feeds before truth gets a hearing. And once a clip feels real, emotion outruns verification. That's the risk and the revolution. Here's why it matters for moments like Jessica and Crockett's. Authentic tension is already gasoline online. Synthetic tension is jet fuel. AI voice cloning can mimic cadence, breath, and emphasis so well that a 6-second quote can be manufactured to fit any narrative arc. Add smart captioning, rapid edits, and micro-targeting, and suddenly entire audiences are reacting to a moment that never occurred. Trust becomes fragile. Doubt becomes default. But it's not all doom. The same technology that fakes can also flag. Audio watermarks, provenance metadata, and forensic tools are getting better at catching anomalies. Platforms, regulators, and campaigns are beginning to set disclosure norms for synthetic media, slowly, imperfectly, but moving. And creators who value credibility are learning to show their receipts, posting longer context clips, transcripts, and verified archives to anchor the conversation. Transparency is a strategy. For communicators, the practical playbook is evolving fast. Pre-bunk likely fakes before they appear. Build a recognizable language style and signature phrases that are hard to spoof without detection. React rapidly with evidence when a fake circulates, and use calm, repeatable statements to counter the rush. For audiences, the rule of thumb is simple. Pause, verify, then share. Slowing down is power. Future-proof takeaway: in an age where anyone can be imitated, authenticity must be architected. Treat every memorable line like a liability and an asset. Craft it, verify it, and protect it, because tomorrow's viral moment might need a proof of origin stamp to endure. Sometimes a moment isn't planned as a turning point, but it becomes one anyway. Picture a routine hearing: scripted questions, rehearsed statements, carefully managed tempers. Then a barb slips out, quick, cutting, unmistakably personal. It wasn't designed to be the night's headline, yet within minutes, staffers are fielding calls, clips are flying across timelines, and the exchange is being reframed as the moment. That's how fast the ground moves beneath a careless insult. Here's the anatomy of what happens next. First, an instant narrative forms. Who struck first? Who held composure? Who delivered the cleaner counter? Audiences decide roles before facts settle: aggressor, target, survivor. Second, amplification engines roar. Commentators isolate the 5-second core and pair it with charged captions. The original context shrinks, the archetype swells. Third, consequences arrive. Donors react, colleagues recalibrate distance, and future media hits are suddenly framed by that single line. One phrase, multiple fallout zones. What makes this case study instructive is how composure converts chaos into capital. The speaker who resists escalation, responds with a crisp retort, and shifts back to principle often wins the edit. Calm is strategy. Precision is leverage. When a rival swings wild, a measured sentence can turn their force against them. That's not just optics, it's momentum. Practical takeaway for high-stakes settings: assume a hot mic lifestyle. Pre-commit to a 3-beat response, pause for breath, reframe with values, deliver one memorable sentence. Keep it short, keep it strong. Then pivot back to substance, so editors have a dignified exit ramp to highlight. 2 facts, 1 punch. Escalation thrills, but restraint persuades. That's durable power. In the end, the unexpected insult didn't define the night. The response did. The clip people replayed wasn't the jab, it was the poise that answered it. Control under fire is the ultimate headline. Want a line that lands and lasts? Start with clarity. 1 idea per sentence. Strip every extra word until what remains feels inevitable. The most memorable phrases sound like they've always existed. That's not luck, it's ruthless editing. Crisp language beats clever language when stakes are high. Clarity wins. Second, anchor emotion to value. Don't just aim for heat, aim for meaning. Pair a charged word with a core principle: fairness, dignity, safety, accountability. Emotion without value is noise. Emotion plus value is signal. People remember what makes them feel and what helps them believe. Third, master cadence. Great lines have rhythm. Short bursts, a pause, a punch. Read it aloud. Does it snap? Can someone repeat it after hearing it once? If not, tighten the syllables and sharpen the verbs. Strong verbs, simple nouns, concrete images. Rhythm makes recall effortless. Fourth, plan the pivot. A great one-liner is often followed by a calm bridge back to substance. Deliver the punch, then guide the audience to the point. This is how memorable moments become persuasive moments. Substance gives your line a spine. The pivot earns trust. Fifth, build a phrasebook. Keep a small set of signature lines that reflect your values. A North Star sentence for fairness, for courage, for integrity. Refining these in advance lets you respond under pressure without sounding canned. Prepared doesn't mean fake. Prepared means precise. Sixth, protect your line. In a world of remix and misquote, keep receipts, longer context, transcripts, timestamps. Post the original alongside the clip. Own your message before others define it. Proof preserves power. Final drill. Compress your core message into 10 words or fewer. Then test it in real conversations. If it holds, you've got a keeper. If it crumbles, keep cutting. Short, true, and felt. That's the formula. Craft it, deliver it, let it work. Summarize. From Jessica's shout to Crockett's viral rise, moments prove the mic can be mightier than the sword. Tease next video. A deeper dive into when comedy destroys political careers.